Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:07. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on this Christmas Eve. Boy, that went fast, didn't it? Coming up at 7:05, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer on that friendly fire incident we just spoke about over the Red Sea. 7:35, Erica Donalds. Now, she's the wife of Representative Byron Donalds, also an education expert. We'll talk about what President Trump plans to do with the Department of Education, what that might look like. 8:05, John Eastman. He's got a film about his whole hell that he's been through for the last 4 years, all for giving legal advice to Donald Trump. It's called The Eastman Dilemma, Lawfare or Justice, and we're going to talk to our friend John Eastman coming up at that time. And then at 8:35, John Gabriel. He's a former U.S. Navy submarine nuclear reactor operator. He's a columnist. You know that name, X-John, on social media. He's been blogging about politics and military affairs for over 20 years, going back to the OG days of blogging. And he's got his first new novel out, Sink the Rising Sun. So we're going to talk to John Gabriel about that. There's something about talking to old friends at this time of year, and that's why we're happy to have Mercedes Schlapp, who is not old, but she is an old friend.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Good morning.
You're calling me old.
No, I'm saying
nice,
you're an
Larry.
old friend.
Really
We've
nice.
known each other since kindergarten.
We're an old friend.
I don't sound like that. I sound nothing like that.
I need more Botox, I think. But
What do you mean more? I have not used any Botox. I have steered clear of all of that.
I didn't
stuff.
say you. I said me. I don't know why guys get the Botox. I think men can age so naturally. It's women we just have a harder time. I mean, it's just the reality of life.
You and Mercedes, of course, her husband is Matt Schlapp, who is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. And I know that you're in preparations for CPAC right now, which will be third week of February, right? I think the weekend of the 25th, if I remember.
February
right?
19th through the 22nd, I want to say.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And, of course, this is going to be a triumphant. It'll be 1 month into the new Trump presidency. It's going to be a heck of a scene. We will always be there. Down at Broadcast Row, O'Connor and Company will be there. You should be there too. WMAL will have a great presence there. And I know that this CPAC is going to be very important because not just President Trump, of course, and retaking the White House and the executive branch of government, but Mercedes, the Republicans now have a majority in the Senate, 53 seats to 47, which is a pretty good one. You can get a lot done with that sort of room to maneuver in the Senate. But meanwhile, over in the House, Speaker Mike Johnson, assuming that he retains the gavel, and I think all indications are that he will come 9 days from now when the new Congress forms, he's going to have a challenge, especially when it comes to keeping that Republican House unified. And you would think winning the presidency with a very strong leader like Donald Trump, that would serve as a unifying factor. But we just saw in this last fight over the continuing resolution, debt ceiling and all that stuff, that it's not going to be easy. And I'd love for you to take a few minutes to talk, because I know you and Matt are very passionate about this, and you've been speaking out about this, that this is the time for Republicans to get in line. We always talk about Nancy Pelosi and how she's able to crack the whip, and she's able to get all of these people in her conference, even if they disagree with each other and hate each other. But when it comes time to get together and vote and get something done, she always has the ability to twist the arms and get it done.
I mean, Larry,
it's time for Republicans to show some unity, isn't it?
Wait. Let's step back here for a second on Nancy Pelosi. Okay, literally the woman breaks her hip. She's in a hospital in Germany, and she manages to take down AOC so she wouldn't become the oversight chair in the House of Representatives.
So here's it's incredible.
Has so much power. She's the one that's like, Joe, you got to step aside so that Kamala can run. I mean, let's be real.
It's phenomenal.
Okay.
So here's my question, and this is because we both have great respect and admiration for Speaker Mike Johnson as a man, as a person. When he was a congressman on the Judiciary Committee, he was a great interview. He was passionate. He's the real deal. He loves this country. He loves the Lord. Is he cutthroat enough? Is he able to do the kind of things that because Nancy is cutthroat. She is an assassin. Do we need an assassin? Do we have an assassin? Do Republicans? Do we even act this way though? We don't.
Here's what I don't like.
Yeah.
When Mike Johnson first came out with the spending bill, which we didn't agree with in terms of how that spending bill came out, and I do think that there were. I think that they could have dealt with this from a very different way in terms of working very closely. Now, I do think that there was work happening, and exchanges happening between the Trump team on the policy level and Mike Johnson's office, but I don't think they understood how this was going to blow up in their faces from a PR perspective, right? Yeah. So there were missteps. Let's just be clear. Yeah. With that being said, I hate when these senators come out and start pointing the finger, senators like Senator Rand Paul and several others who came out literally calling Mike Johnson weak, trying to take him down, saying that he's the wrong speaker. Let's replace him with Elon Musk. Come on, seriously. That is ridiculous. Mike Johnson has been loyal to Donald Trump. He has been on the campaign trail. He did what he could to keep the House majority while still a slim majority, keep the House majority and stay focused on task. And Mike Johnson will be a very strong ally and advocate of President Trump. Yeah. So to try to take him down, and this is coming from this group, there's always like this group of people like the Tucker Carlsons and those guys who obviously have an incredibly important voice in what is the conservative movement and the MAGA world. But with that being said, it drives me crazy when we eat our own. Okay? Right. Like if you were to tell me Mike Johnson has been a jerk, he's been horrible to President Trump, that has not been the case. Okay? Like maybe, yes, it should have been handled differently, but do you just take him out and then vacate the seat and then cause huge chaos? You're losing all this political capital in the meantime and not getting the job done of the American people, and then it looks like we can't really govern. And so my thing is yes, there has to be better coordination ahead of time. The president will need to dictate what has to get done. We are going to be in a very different ball game going into this administration with the House majority, Senate majority, and the White House in Republican control. And then that's going to be an opportunity to really get things done quickly. The mandates on the immigration, the mandates on the tax cut scenario as well. They'll need to decide on budget reconciliation, if there's one, if there's two. So I just feel that these were unnecessary attacks on Mike Johnson and trying to take him out just because of the spending bill. I think it was the wrong approach.
Now's the time for unity. That is for sure.
That is the time for unity.
You cannot afford anything short of unity in a unified front. Otherwise, you're not going to get done what needs to get done through the legislative branch. But I guess one of the arguments here is, and I'm with you, especially, and let me just, add to your sentiments by saying I don't like the attacks on Mike Johnson if you don't have some other alternative plan as well. That's where
there is no alternative plan.
Exactly.
There is Elon Musk. You're going to put Elon Musk there?
That's not a plan. That's not a reality. If there was somebody stepping up saying, hey, here's what's wrong and here's what I'm going to do better, so I want everyone to vote for me, that is not happening. Yeah. And we've been down this path before. And it's not like we've got, we're in the middle of the session like last time, which was also a nightmare. You've got very few days where you've got to get the business done of the Electoral College on January 6th, forming your Congress, getting the president-elect in line to be president on January 20th, and begin your hearings on confirmation. You can't just sit around. You have work to do.
Right. That's right. Look, I think you have to understand for Mike Johnson, you have a Republican Party that's very divided on these fiscal issues. There's the fiscal hawks and the ones that want to lift the debt ceiling. Well, those fiscal hawks, like Chip Roy, they weren't going to budge. They made a commitment to their constituents that they were not going to vote for supporting the lifting of the debt ceiling. That, of course, created a big issue for Mike Johnson that he had to manage.
Yeah. Hold that thought, because there's more about unity. And listen, the way unity happens, the way we move forward and everybody falls in line is solidifying around a leader. And obviously, that's President Trump across the board. So what does unity look like under President Trump starting now and going into this new Congress forming in 9 days? Well, we got a glimpse of it down in Arizona at the Turning Point USA conference. He had some important things to say at that speech, and we want to share some of it with you, and whether Donald Trump is, in fact, going to be that unifying force for Republicans who, generally speaking, you try to get Republicans to do the same thing, it's like herding cats. But a leader like Trump can do it. We'll talk about that in a moment. First, though, it's 6:15. So this is a time where Republicans need to be unified. I understand they don't all get along. Look at the other side of the aisle. Trust me, they hate each other even more. They have less in common. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi have nothing in common other than that D at the end of their name. And yet they figure out how to make it work because they recognize that if you're not in the majority and you're not able to govern and you're not able to scrape together enough votes to pass something, then you can't do anything. You can't accomplish anything, and you have no power. And that's what they're good at. We need to take a lesson from that. That's important for us. That doesn't mean compromising all of your principles. Of course not. But it also means recognizing that if you can't get in line and actually follow a leader, then what's the point of getting the majority? What's the point of winning an election? Donald Trump, Turning Point USA conference led by Charlie Kirk and the team down there. They're in Arizona over the last several days, and this weekend President Trump was out there, and he was pretty clear about what his agenda is going to look like. Nothing exactly new here compared to what he was talking about during the campaign, so no one should be shocked that President Trump is going to lead and do the things that he promised during the campaign. But he was very clear on some things that, let's face it, we as Republicans are used to this phenomenon where we hear a lot of stuff about what a leader is going to do when they're running for office, and then once they win, suddenly they change their mind, or they have different priorities, or they decide to focus on other things that they didn't even talk about during the election. We've seen that with past Republicans. Doesn't appear that Donald Trump is going to be like that. Listen to this about in terms of his leadership and in terms of some of the things he's focusing on that echo exactly what he was saying at the rallies during the election.
With a stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the transgender lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation, get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high school. And we will keep men out of women's sports. And that will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one, right? Under the Trump administration, it will be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Mercedes, I point this out because, first of all, it's the kind of thing that, again, if I may be blunt, I, as a Republican for the last 30 years, I'm used to conservative candidates saying stuff like that during the election, and then once they win and get into office, they sort of forget that stuff. Trump is already projecting on day one that he's going to follow through on some of the less, politically correct cultural issues that I think were a big part of this election and the overwhelming victory. But he's also, the fact that he's saying day one, we're not hesitating, we're doing exactly what we said. That helps build a following. It helps build people follow you if you want to be a leader when you actually come through and you do the tough stuff on day one.
Well, and here's what you have. You have a proven leader. He knows now what he has to do. They will move quickly. It is not like the chaos that we saw in the first, I would say, 6 months of the Trump administration, where you had a lot of people in there that didn't know what they were doing, and they were all trying to kill each other.
Right.
And so I think, President Trump he's a doer. I've always seen him. Every time I've, spent time with him, he just wants to get things done, and he wants his team to move quickly. And so I think that's why you're going to see so many of these executive orders ready to go day one, really start making these changes in the federal government, really push his cabinet to look quickly in and say, okay, how do we get rid of unnecessary regulations? How do we make sure that we protect girls and women in sports? How, what else do we need to do to make sure that we can get a handle on this immigration system? I mean, when I listen to Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas say that it's not his responsibility, that some children are being trafficked in the U.S., that to me is not an acceptable answer from an American official.
Right.
It is not.
Oh, it's
the mere fact that he's like, oh, it's not my responsibility. I mean, that is to me, just a complete, I think, disgusting denial of your oath to basically
100%.
Protect the American people.
But when Trump does this, though, when he projects this leadership and projects the strength that you just described, does it translate to the legislative branch? Do other Republicans in town see that and say, yeah, this is what we should be doing. Let's let Trump set the agenda, and we're going to get stuff done for these first 100 days, and then we can have our little bickering and our fight. But launching out, starting the beginning of January and through the first several months of this presidency, we're going to be there because this is our chance. Do they get that?
Look, I don't think they have a choice. I think one of the things that President Trump does very effectively is that he's going to be calling all the time. He's going to call Mike Johnson. He's going to call John Thune, which I think has been very receptive to President Trump. They recognize that they have a job to do and they got to move fast. And so they are going to run into some issues, but I do believe that that there is going to be quick movement coming from the legislative branch, because we know that the American people, they're calling for, they want tax cuts. They want national security. I mean, these are things that are non-negotiable right now.
All right. There you have it. You heard it. Now just listen to Mercedes, fall in line, and do what you're told. It's
Get in line, people. No, I'm kidding.
It's 6:24. Coming up, as families gather for this Christmas season, today on Christmas Eve and all through the week, many times you'll huddle around a television, put in your favorite Christmas movie, and get right back to that moment the first time you saw it. Well, what movie is that for your family? And we'll tell you what it is for my family and for Mercedes' family coming up next. It's 6:36. It's O'Connor and Company this Christmas Eve. Thanks so much for letting us be a part of your day and, well, your year for that matter, and these amazing holidays that we get to enjoy together. Coming up later in the program at 7:05, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer on the current state of our military, including that friendly fire incident and other revelations. 7:35, Erica Donalds. Now, she's the wife of Representative Byron Donalds, also at Leadership Institute School Board Program, CEO of Optima Ed. She's an education expert, and we're going to talk about what the Trump plan is for the Department of Education. 8:05, John Eastman on his amazing documentary called The Eastman Dilemma, Lawfare or Justice, a documentary film that really tells the story of what Eastman's been through at the hands of the Biden administration and, for that matter, the deep state weaponization of the Justice Department. And then at 8:35, John Gabriel is got a brand new novel called Sink the Rising Sun. Great Christmas present here for any of you who need a last-minute one. It's Mercedes Schlapp and Larry O'Connor. Good morning, Mercedes.
Good morning, Larry. Merry Christmas Eve. This
Amen.
is a special, special day.
Merry
it's
Christmas Eve.
Wonderful to be joining you.
Thank you.
On this incredible morning.
I appreciate it. It's always
really
good to be around friends and family, and you're both, really. So as you gather, I don't know about you, most families now have a tradition, especially here in America, because, we're the birthplace of the great American cinema, I should say, worldwide cinema. Hollywood has its problems, but they're very good at making these movies that stay with you your entire life, and they're transgenerational, if I could use the word trans. And I don't know about you, but it is a tradition in my family, and with my in-laws as well, that there are certain movies that you just watch every year, no matter what. You've got your family gathering around you. They're all coming from places. Do you have a go-to movie that everyone, or do you have 100%. A couple of them?
We have a couple of them, and we really, especially on Christmas Day, after everyone's opened up their gifts, we've gone to church, we've visited with people, then we settle down, we watch. It's a Wonderful Life is so critical in our family, because that was the movie that when I first started dating Matt Schlapp and I went over to Wichita, so this was right after we got engaged. So we got engaged December 12th. I go meet his family for the first time. It was the first Christmas movie that we watched together as a couple. So we carry on that tradition with our children every single year. And I think it is, I'm going to get sentimental. The story of redemption and the story of the fact that each of us have this incredible purpose on earth is, to me, so alive in that movie. Yeah. It's a Wonderful Life. And
we have a responsibility to each other.
Yes, and that guardian angel looking after you, saying, if you would not be here, if you would take your life, if you would have never been born, look at all these people
I know.
in the lives that you wouldn't have impacted. And
to my brother George, the richest man in town.
Yes.
It makes me cry every time when he says
Makes
that.
me cry every
richest
time.
man in
Then,
town.
of course,
we have
there's
so much
Elf.
in common. That is our good. It is not Christmas unless I watch It's a Wonderful Life with my
Yes.
children and with my family. 100%.
Yes.
We have that in common.
And then we've got Elf. So let's go a little more.
Oh, see, this is
cheerful
where
here.
we completely go in opposite directions.
No,
Stop
Elf
it.
is so fun,
Elf
and the
is
kids
so
love
overrated.
it.
Oh, my!
Stop it!
I
It's
love
so
James Caan
funny.
and Bob Newhart. Will Ferrell just gets on my nerves so bad in that.
Well, because
movie.
he plays the same character in every movie. But
Thank you.
I do
And it's
love the
annoying.
old Christmas movies of Santa Claus, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, like all of the Drummer Boy.
Yes.
Like I love those old old-fashioned movies.
We did
And
two
then,
of those
course, there's-
yesterday. We did the Rudolph, the little claymation ones, the little marionette.
Why do we watch? We
I
watch it
don't
every
know.
year.
It's ridiculous. We did Rudolph yesterday, and then we did Santa Claus is Coming to Town with the Burgermeister
That one
stealing
is
all
so
the toys.
fantastic.
Yes, it's a good one.
Fantastic. They're just great.
Those are great. We love those. And Charlie Brown Christmas. We haven't done Charlie Brown Christmas yet, actually, which we probably do today. We also do either White Christmas
White Christmas
or
is so
or
fantastic.
Holiday Inn, or sometimes we do both. If we really
Ooh,
want
I
to
haven't done
overdose
Holiday Inn.
on being well, Holiday Inn is the original movie that White Christmas was introduced in. That's the black and white one.
Oh,
About
okay.
Bing
Yeah, we have not
Crosby
watched
going
that.
and starting an inn in Vermont, and
Yeah.
they do it's amazing. But then White Christmas was such a blockbuster, huge hit with Bing Crosby that they made a new movie called White Christmas.
White
about
Christmas is great.
Bing Crosby, and that's when they're the World
Yeah.
War II veterans, and they do the whole fundraiser for the general.
Yeah.
But those are two good. And that's what my mother-in-law. Those are her two favorite ones. But she's got a whole. We get to Oklahoma and she has set up on her Roku a whole playlist of movies. She's also the type of woman who she'll watch the Hallmark Christmas movies throughout the year. I mean,
We went through a phase where we would watch the Hallmark Christmas
poor
movies.
Matt.
And then they went all woke, and then I was like, I can't. But we did watch several of them for a long time. And I don't know, I kind of fell out of love with them because they were so cheesy. There was always one or two that were great, and then I just go back to the basics. And I just so what Lucia and I are doing this Christmas is we're reading the book Divergent. So we read it to each other. So we picked a book. And we're like, you know what? Let's just read it during the Christmas holidays. And we sit every night and just read a chapter or two. Last night I was so tired because I had to work so much yesterday.
Yeah.
Because Chris Plant, of course, is on vacation. So I got
You're covering for him at Newsmax.
Covering for him in Newsmax.
Listen, we've all been covering for Chris Plant
we've
for
been covering
years
for Chris
now.
Plant
I think that's the
forever.
thing. People don't realize how much we have to cover for that guy.
So the girls, so we sat down, Lucy and I only got through 2 chapters. I could barely read. And then she was mocking me for half the time that I was reading because I could barely put the words together. And she's like, Mom, I've got this. So we're reading a book together. So
That's sweet.
another thing I'd highly recommend is finding a good book or novel to read together during
I love
Christmas
that.
holiday.
All right.
Yeah.
So can we just do a couple here? Here's a cut 71, if you don't mind. Cut 71 there, Michael.
What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down. Hey, that's a pretty good idea. I'll give you the moon, Barry.
I'll take it.
It's so good.
Oh, it's so good. It just makes you want to cry.
And there's no possible way Hollywood could make a movie like that today. They just
No.
wouldn't. They can't. They're incapable.
No,
of
they'll
it.
ruin it. They'll ruin It's a Wonderful Life. You can't remake that. It is
Everything about that movie, it speaks to humanity, and it is, and it's not an overtly Christmas movie, but
Right.
the themes of love and family and our place in the world and how society is counting on each and every one
is.
of us to do our job. It's why God put us here, and that's kind of what Christmas is about too. That whole redemption thing. 6:43. I'm so fortunate and lucky. The holiday season, I always sort of reflect on how lucky I am and how blessed and how touched by God's grace I am. And one of the things is that I work with a team of people who I truly do love and care about and feel like they're great best friends, if not family. And we work so well together. We have so much in common. We're on the same page. And this morning, Mercedes, you don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to explain it all in a moment. Mercedes perfectly exemplified this for me because I saw this moment on Face the Nation with Alejandro Mayorkas and Margaret Brennan over the weekend. And the moment I saw it, I immediately thought of Mercedes Schlapp. I immediately thought of Matt and Mercedes and the work she did. And I said, oh, my God, when Mercedes sees this, she's going to be spitting mad. And then this morning, when we started talking and setting up for the show, what was the first thing you said to me, Mercedes? Did you see what Mayorkas said? 100%. It's like, so let's remind everybody exactly what happened. Alejandro Mayorkas, who is talking about the fact that Homeland, and this is, by the way, this is my favorite thing about the left and the media. And when I say favorite, I mean it's the thing that drives me insane. For the last several years, they've been saying, oh, everything's fine, the border's fine, there's no problem. Then when we found out that over 400,000 children have gone unaccounted for and lost, the left, the Democrats, the media said, well, that's not true. That's not true at all. And, of course, now, over the weekend, Mayorkas says, well, of course it's true. Yes, but it's not our fault and it's not our responsibility. Here, let's listen, cut 8.
Well, Margaret, we certainly have received reports of children being trafficked, even those as to whom we know where they are. That is outside the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. What we do is we turn children over within 72 hours, as the law requires, to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then HHS places those children. Of course, we investigate cases of trafficking.
You know, Mercedes, go ahead.
What is it? Okay, it's outside the possibility of the Department of Homeland Security, or we investigate the cases of trafficking.
Right.
It is the worst answer. The man, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, should be fired just based on this answer. There was no sense of compassion. There was no sense of determination to save these children. There was no sense of protecting these children. There was no, let's do an interagency, communication where we're working with HHS to identify these children, to make sure that these children are not in harm's way. This is such a failure of the Biden administration, in addition to the constant flow of illegal aliens coming into this country, where we've seen one crime after the other, and yet there is no responsibility from Secretary Mayorkas to Joe Biden to Javier Becerra. None of it. None of it. They've done nothing to save these children. None of it.
The delivery, the tone that you just said, the lack of passion when he's talking. I likened it to, you're at a Denny's and a waiter goes by and you say, "Could I get some ice water here?" And said, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's not my section." But exactly. I'll look into it for you. Yes. It's like, no, imagine, I don't care what your job is. Imagine you work in Washington, D.C. as the Secretary of Homeland Security and you just acknowledged, oh, yeah, well, a lot of these children are being trafficked right now. I don't care if it's your responsibility, which, by the way, it is his responsibility, his culpability, but even if you don't have the responsibility or power or the ability to do anything about it, wouldn't you be up on the rooftop of your agency screaming at the top of your lungs, there are children being trafficked and raped and sold into sex slavery? Can we do something about this, please? But instead, his response is, well, that's not really our job. We don't really need to do anything about it. And meanwhile, you actually are doing something about it through your initiative at CPAC.
Yeah, no, we're working with Congress. We've been pushing the Trafficker Survivors Relief Act, working with both Democrats and Republicans on it, of course, mostly Republicans on this issue. But there is no sense of responsibility coming out of this administration. And I pray to God with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, with what we're going to be seeing with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that they prioritize, that they create a commission that would basically help in ensuring that we stop human trafficking, basically the selling of our children, this modern slavery, which has no place here in the United States. Our top priority as a country is national security. It is the protection of our children, and we have an obligation to make sure we know where these children are going, and they shouldn't fall into the hands of these traffickers.
This is such a blight on our country, on our culture, and certainly on this Biden administration and this government, and Mayorkas in particular. I talked to an expert on child sex trafficking, and he was a consultant on Cry for Freedom, and he said
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom, excuse me. And he said one of the biggest problems here is, like anything else of a criminal nature, for the most part, this is a question of supply and demand. And the really shameful thing is there is a demand, and much of that demand is here in this country. And Absolutely disgusting. It's awful.
And Secretary Mayorkas even said sometimes the government loses track.
Yeah,
so
we've got. You're right.
Children.
I should get to him so we can really get our blood boiling on this Christmas Eve. Let's go to cut 9 here. Listen, and the bureaucratic disconnected,
it's so gross,
automatron delivery here by this ghoul. Here, cut 9.
But there are children who are reunited with a parent here in the United States or a legal guardian, and they move. And sometimes the government loses track. Individuals do not comply with their reporting obligations or otherwise.
We just lose track, What are you going to do?
Track.
It's like he works for the post office. Oh, I'm sorry, your Christmas cards got lost in the mail. We'll try to make it up to you.
Yeah. Over 400,000 children missing. Over 400,000 children who have come to the border who are missing. That is a humanitarian crisis.
And listen to this one, cut 10, where he acknowledges, yes, the numbers are extraordinary, but he says, it would be wrong to think that they're all being abused. Listen.
I think it is inaccurate to say that all of them are trafficked or victimized. There are a number of reasons why we might lose track of an individual. That is not necessarily specific to this administration. That has been a long-standing challenge in the immigration system.
Yeah, and by the way, he kept spinning this back. Oh, we need reform, which of course means amnesty. I don't know, maybe it's me, but if 400,000 children went missing during the Trump administration, I think we might have heard something about it from CBS News or from CNN.
Why wouldn't the administration and Department of Homeland, along with Homeland, the White House, and HHS, come together and think outside the freaking box and figure out a way that you can go back to DNA testing so you know when a child comes in with an adult to see if they are related, number one. Number two, that we make sure that we figure out when these kids are unaccompanied minors, where are they ending up? In many cases, they have the same phone number, the same address. They're sent to the same place over and over again.
Yeah.
Who's checking on those kids?
No one's checking.
Nobody's checking on those kids.
And you just heard from your Secretary of Homeland Security, who again sounded like a robot reading lines, artificial intelligence. Tom Homan goes on cable news right now, your incoming border czar, and when he starts talking about this topic, he starts to get emotional. You can see tears welling up in his eyes because he's law enforcement. He's seen it. He knows how bad this is. Help is on the way. It can't come soon enough. 6:55 WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives with
WMAL-FM Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.